Good morning, guys. This is Danny with ParTay. So I just wanted to take a couple of seconds while we had a little bit of bright sun that was popping through. You can kind of see it right there in the trees, to show you a little more detail about the formula. So this is it. This is essentially what makes all of our stuff work. Just take one of these bad boys and drop it into a cup of water, and poof, a 100-inch screen comes out. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? No, this is actually a glob that had fallen. I'm trying to get it to focus in. This is a glob that had fallen on uh, one of the glass screens that I use. I say glass screen, it's just a glass plate that I use for pouring out, because I'm also working on trying to develop resins from this rather than just coatings as well. Um, and you can see in this, and try to get some detail in here. Um, that's that's the secret sauce. Now, it doesn't look like much. It's not very impressive, but what it does do is, if you notice here, you see the little holes in there. Now, those aren't holes; those are actually just the thinner spots underneath. Um, so you can see they're pits, but it's solid on the surface here. Um, so uh, the way this works is, whenever it's laid out smoothly and you add the tinning agent, right? The tinning agent acts as a balancer. So what it does is it basically smooths everything in this mixture out and distributes it evenly across the surface, so that you get maximum reflectivity and diffusion. Now I'm going to show you just the diffusion agent here. So I've got a little bit that I'd taken and put on the glass. Now you'll notice the sun, so when it comes across, right, you can see it go back and forth across. Now, in a multi-application, um, well, with multi-application, so you do multi-layer applications, you would just do a very light coat of the diffusing agent across the surface. And the reason for that is because this is too much. This would block a lot of your light. So that's in its pure form. Um, the amount that's added to the mixture is extremely delicate because it's sensitive. If you put too much, you block the image and it actually kind of blurs it. And that's one of the difficulties with multi-layer application, is that if you're not careful, you'll build up so many layers that you blur your image. It starts to get a little hazy, like almost there's auras around everything. Um, what you really want is, you want it to just enough, and getting that right balance to where it diffuses and spreads that light, disperses it evenly across the surface, right? So that you don't get your glare, you don't get hot spotting, and your ambient light just sort of hits it. It's a rough, rigid. If you looked at it microscopically, it'd be rough and rigid, and it would, essentially just kind of start to stop the light, and it gradients it out. In a much tighter gradient than this big wide gradient that you see a lot of times, where you see these big golden hues that go across the screen. Now, that's from the side, that's from the top, and that's from the bottom. It won't do that from front on. As a matter of fact, I was reading some forum stuff where, even with your screens that are somewhere in the ballpark of, $4,000 to $5,000 or more, it's the same thing. Front on light is problematic because a screen's not smart enough to accept, the projector light and just kick out the ambient light from the front. It's not going to be smart enough. Even on your structured screens, this presents a bit of a problem. Now, it helps with a structured screen, but it's not going to be optimal. But with ambient light situations, you want to be able to get your side lights from the ceiling, lights that may bounce up from solid surfaces, on your floor or your tables or things like that. It helps. But that's it. This ugly little piece of stuff does awesome wonders. And, as we move forward, I really want to continue to work towards So you can see there. Now, like I said, that's in concentrated form. That would just suck if you threw it onto a screen. But getting the amount of that diffusing agent, and this contains that diffusing agent. So this is an all-in-one. The only thing that's not in here is the tint. That's it. And this, while it seems opaque, really, whenever it's spread out in a thin layer, like I said, this is a glob. When it's spread out in a thin layer, it's semi-transparent, which means it holds tint very well. The molecular structure of this is dispersed a little further, so it does allow for a lot of tint add. And that comes in handy, because if you think any of those guys out there that are mixers, if you take, say with paint, let's just stick with paint for a second. If you take paint and you take a silver paint, like a silver metallic, and you take just to say a teaspoon, and then you go to put in some black, when you first start in this, you think, well, I'll put a couple of drops of black in there and we'll get it all darkened up. Man, it can take 2 or 3 teaspoons against the silver to even really start to impact the tone of that. It just eats up tone. It just eats up the saturation. And essentially what you end up doing is you have to put a ton of black in there to help compensate. Well, that's the reason I say with paints, I can control, with polymers, I can control that much better than paint, because you don't have to do that. So I can keep the transparency using, say, like an ink-based tone, as opposed to trying to use paint tone to change the color of a metallic. And it also helps now, not using paint as a metallic additive. And there's things out there. There's a lot of things. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I'm going to be expanding this with, I don't have yet. I'll have next week. It'll be shipped here, so I'll be experimenting with it. And it's something to help reduce the density of the formula itself, make it brighter, but also reduce the density of it. But right now, it's use of metallics and micas. There's powder coatings that I'm playing with, but powder coatings typically have to be cured, and when you're trying to cure like a 100-inch screen, that's extraordinarily difficult without major heat lamps. So probably not in the near future, but it is something that we're thinking and working towards. So just wanted to give you guys an update on the formula, the glob, and how it works, that kind of stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and hope you guys have a great day.